Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, our mission is to really get into 4 criminal mysteries that did so much more than just make headlines. They changed how America saw itself, how it thought about safety, and, how we investigate the truly unthinkable.
They're not just stories, they're cultural touchstones. And when you put them side by side from 1932 all the way up to 2023, you see this really uncomfortable pattern. That while our tools, our forensics have evolved like you wouldn't believe, this sort of dark potential of human behavior, it stays horrifyingly the same.
Exactly. And the source material we're looking at really gives us a window into that evolution. We'll start with the Lindbergh Kidnapping, the first real media circus.
Then you have the complete opposite, the total silence around the boy in the box for decades.
Right. And then a crime so brutal it creates a whole new literary genre, the Clutter Murders. And we'll finish with the Long Island serial killer, LISK, who is, the absolute modern face of a predator hiding in plain sight.
And for you listening, the goal here isn't just to learn what happened. It's to understand why these specific cases are so stuck in our collective memory and how the investigations either pushed forensic science forward or, in some cases, stalled it for years.
Okay, let's unpack this with the one that really wrote the script for modern true crime.
Right.
1932, the Lindbergh Kidnapping. And you can't overstate the context here.
No, you really can't.
This wasn't just some rich family's kid being taken. This was like the royal family being attacked.
It was a national shattering. Charles Lindbergh wasn't just a celebrity. He was this global icon. He was the optimistic, untouchable hero of the Roaring '20s.
The man who flew across the Atlantic alone.
Exactly. So when his 20-month-old son, Charles Jr., is just snatched from his nursery on the 2nd floor of their brand new isolated estate in New Jersey.
On this foggy night in March.
It created this moment of national psychological breakdown. The thinking was, if America's golden couple can't keep their child safe in their own home, what chance does anyone else have?
And the pressure on the police was just immediate, and it was massive. And it was made worse by Lindbergh himself, who basically took charge of the whole thing.
He did. And all they had to go on that night was, a crude homemade wooden ladder left under the window?
And of course, the ransom note.
The ransom note is so fascinating. It immediately gives you this weird, clumsy criminal profile. It asks for $50,000, which was a fortune then, but it's just filled with these bizarre misspellings.
Like what?
Things like spelling the word board as B-O-R-D and using these phonetic structures that sounded, vaguely German. Those errors, plus this signature.
The 2 interlocking circles.
Right, with the hole in the middle. The press called it the seal of the underworld. Those were the first big clues, and they were everywhere, in every newspaper almost instantly.
So Lindbergh, totally desperate, decides to bypass the police and starts this negotiation maze.
He's just driven by this one hope, get the child back. So he uses this retired school principal, a man named Dr. John Condon, as a go-between, codenamed Jassy. Yeah. Condon puts ads in the paper, and after all these cryptic instructions, he meets this mysterious guy in a Bronx cemetery. And that's where he hands over the $50,000.
And the money itself was a clue.
Yeah, a huge one. The sources really stress this. Most of the bills were paid in gold certificates, which were about to be taken out of circulation. So the idea was they would be incredibly easy to track later on.
So they pay the ransom in April of '32. The whole country is holding its breath, hoping the child is safe, maybe on a boat somewhere. And then a month later, the truth comes out.
It's just brutal. On May 12th, a truck driver discovers the child's body, partially buried in the woods just a few miles from the Lindbergh home.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The autopsy showed the child had been dead for months. He was likely killed almost immediately, probably from a fall off that poorly made ladder during the kidnapping itself. The ransom payment was just tragically pointless.
So at that point, the whole investigation changes. It's not about rescue anymore. It's about revenge.
It's a manhunt. And the entire focus shifts to tracking that marked ransom money, which slowly but surely leads them to a German immigrant carpenter named Bruno Richard Hauptmann.
And it was the gold certificates that did it.
It was the starting point. It took 2 years, but one of those marked gold certificates finally turned up at a gas station, and they traced it back to Hauptmann. But what really sealed his fate, certainly in the public's mind, was the forensic evidence. For 1935, it was just groundbreaking stuff.
Yeah, let's talk about the wood evidence. It was the so-called smoking gun.
Yeah.
But the way they connected it is It's just incredible.
It's pure ingenuity. So the ladder was homemade, right? 3 separate sections kind of slapped together. The investigators bring in this guy, Arthur Kohler, a wood expert from the U.S. Forest Service.
Right.
And Kohler's work was unbelievably detailed. He looks at the wood from the ladder and matches the species ponderosa pine. And then he finds these tiny specific defects, like old nail holes and unique knot patterns.
So he's not just matching the kind of wood.
No, it's much more specific. He's matching the unique history of a specific piece of wood. He actually testified that one of the ladder rails was cut from a floorboard that used to be in Hauptmann's attic.
How could he possibly know that?
Because of the planer marks, the marks left by the machine at the lumber mill were like a fingerprint, and they matched another piece of wood still in Hauptmann's house. It was a direct physical link from the crime scene to the suspect's home.
And you combine that with the ransom money they found hidden in his garage wall.
And the narrative was complete. The case was closed as far as the public was concerned. Hauptmann was their man.
Which brings us to the trial in 1935, which instantly becomes the trial of the century. I mean, the justice system had never seen anything like this.
No. The sources describe total chaos. Over 700 reporters in this small town, Flemington, New Jersey. The courtroom became a theater. It wasn't about reporting facts anymore. It was about feeding this public need for a villain. And Hauptmann, the German immigrant, he was the perfect bad guy.
But that level of media frenzy, it raises some really troubling questions, doesn't it? About due process, about getting a fair trial.
It absolutely does. I mean, Hauptmann insisted he was innocent right up until his execution in 1936. And later analyses have questioned some of the evidence. There were allegations that police pressured witnesses, maybe even faked some of the marks on the ladder.
The pressure to get a conviction for America's hero must have been immense.
Unbelievable. The need to give America justice for their fallen idol, it probably meant that a careful, unbiased investigation took a backseat to just getting it done.
So the question that still hangs over the case is, was Hauptmann the guy, the only guy? Or was he just a convenient scapegoat?
And the sources don't give a final answer, but the doubt itself is the legacy. On the one hand, the case gave us forensic wood identification, a huge leap forward.
But on the other?
On the other, it showed how celebrity and media pressure can just corrode the justice system. It's a terrible what if, you know? What if Lindbergh had been just some guy? Would the investigation have been slower, more careful? It set the stage for every celebrity trial that came after it.
Okay, so we go from a case that was just defined by this constant global media attention to one defined by decades of absolute crushing silence. We're moving to 1957 Philadelphia and the truly haunting case of the boy in the box.
Yeah, the shock factor here isn't about a hero's loss. It's the complete opposite. It's the mystery of a child who is apparently invisible, unclaimed.
The discovery itself is just heartbreaking.
One of the most heartbreaking in American crime history, really. February 1957, Fox Chase area of Philly. A college student checking his muskrat traps finds him.
And the body is in a box.
In a cardboard box, specifically a JCPenney bassinet box. The boy is maybe 4 to 6 years old. He's naked, bruised, and just folded up inside, discarded like trash.
But what's so strange, what immediately confuses the investigators, is this contradiction they find on his body. There's violence, but there are also these signs of care.
That psychological split is key.
Yeah.
So the boy shows signs of being malnourished. He has old scars, clear abuse, but he had also been bathed very recently. His fingernails were neatly trimmed. His hair had been crudely cut, probably to hide his identity.
So what does that suggest?
It suggests a perpetrator who was deeply conflicted, probably a caregiver, someone who was overcome by panic, but who, in some paradoxical way, tried to give the child a final moment of cleanliness before abandoning him.
And that image, a child who seems cared for in some ways but is just thrown away, that's what created this profound question. How could a child, who we now know as Joseph Augustus Zarelli, how could he not be missed?
That phrase, the child nobody missed, it just paralyzed the investigation from the start. The police launched this huge effort, totally unprecedented at the time.
They put his picture everywhere.
Everywhere. They printed hundreds of thousands of posters with his photograph and sketches, which was really controversial. They were on TV, eventually on milk cartons, anything to get a lead.
And nothing.
Just
Silence.
total silence. No parent ever came forward. His fingerprints didn't match any missing persons reports. His face was shown to millions of people, and not one person recognized him. They were investigating a ghost.
Which forced them to chase down all sorts of theories over the years,
Well,
right?
for decades. One theory was that he came from a nearby foster home or a reform school. Another was that he was part of a traveling family, maybe a carnival, someone passing through who wouldn't be reported missing locally.
The sources also mentioned the possibility of, like, an illegal adoption.
A black market adoption, exactly. A child sold by a parent who would then never report him missing.
Yeah.
And then there was that one compelling lead in 1998, the Martha story.
Right, where a woman claimed her mother had bought the boy and killed him in a rage.
Yeah, it was a fascinating story because it fit the evidence of both care and abuse. But it could never be proven, so it just became another dead end. For 65 years, the case was completely frozen.
And this is where the contrast with Lindbergh is so stark. That case relied on 1930s wood analysis. This case was solved by modern genetics.
The breakthrough in 2022 was pure technological brilliance. The Philly Medical Examiner's Office, pushed by these really dedicated cold case detectives, finally got a usable DNA profile from the boy's remains. And then they used genealogical DNA analysis.
So for anyone listening who isn't familiar, how is that different from what you see on, say, CSI?
So standard forensic DNA tries to match a sample directly to a suspect in a database like CODIS. Genealogical DNA is different. It uses public ancestry databases like the ones people use to build their family trees, to find relatives.
Even distant relatives.
Even third or fourth cousins. Investigators build this massive family tree in reverse, working backwards through generations until they can narrow it down and finally pinpoint the victim himself.
It sounds incredibly painstaking.
It is. It takes years. But in 2022, it worked. They found his name, Joseph Augustus Zarelli.
They gave him back his identity.
They gave him back his humanity. It confirmed he was born in Philly in 1953. The mystery of who he was, that was finally over. It's just a profound testament to never giving up.
But knowing his name didn't solve the whole crime, did it?
And that's the core mystery that's left. We know who Joseph was. We even know who his parents were. But we still don't know who killed him. The investigation has completely shifted from who is this boy to who murdered Joseph Zarelli. His case is this incredible historical marker showing that even if a crime is unsolvable for half a century, science can still demand an answer.
So just 2 years after the boy in the box was found, America gets another profound shock. But this time, it's in a totally different world. We're leaving the city for Holcomb, Kansas, 1959. The Clutter Family Murders.
And this crime attacked a completely different narrative, the idea of rural American safety. The Clutter family, Herbert, Bonnie, and their 2 teenage kids, Nancy and Kenyon, they were, as the source material puts it, the absolute picture of quiet respectability.
Herbert Clutter was this successful, deeply respected farmer. The whole family were pillars of their community.
Which is exactly where the shock comes from. They didn't have any enemies. They didn't have any secrets. This wasn't targeted. It was random, senseless violence that just landed on their doorstep. It shattered this belief that if you lived a good, honest life far away from the cities, you were safe.
And the motive, or the supposed motive, just makes it all the more senseless.
The motive is the core of the tragedy.
Yeah.
The killers were Richard Dick Hickok and Perry Smith, 2 ex-cons, and their whole plan was based on a lie. A former cellmate told Hickok that Herbert Clutter kept a safe in his house with $10,000 cash in it.
A safe that didn't exist.
It never existed. So they drive hundreds of miles, break into this house, spend hours terrorizing this family looking for a mythical safe, and they walk away with what? Maybe $40 and a pair of binoculars.
And the gap between what they expected and what they found is what seems to have triggered the violence.
The brutality was just grotesque. After finding no money, they spent hours in the house before they methodically executed all 4 members of the family. Herbert Clutter was found in the basement, his throat was cut, and he was shot in the head. It went so far beyond a simple robbery gone wrong.
You used the words methodically executed, but criminal psychologists also talk about disorganized rage in this case. How can it be both?
That's such a great question because it gets to the heart of Perry Smith's psychology. The initial plan was calculated, right? A robbery.
Yeah.
But when the plan failed, when there was no money, it devolved into this mess of frustration and rage. The disorganized part is the overkill, the unnecessary level of violence. It suggests a complete loss of control.
But the methodical part was still there.
Yes. Smith was volatile, but he was also capable of the cold, calculated steps of tying everyone up and then systematically eliminating all the witnesses. It's a terrifying psychological combination.
The killers were caught about 6 weeks later, but the real legacy of this crime came after the investigation was over. It came from literature.
Absolutely. This is the crime that really showed the power of storytelling. Truman Capote reads this small article about the murders in the New York Times, and he immediately sees the bigger story. He moves to Kansas and spends the next 6 years researching it.
And the book, In cold blood, it basically invented a genre, the nonfiction novel. What did he do that was so different?
He took the detailed, factual reporting of a journalist and combined it with the narrative drive and emotional depth of a novelist. He told the story from two perspectives at once: the lives of the innocent Clutter family and the dark, twisted path of the killers. He made you feel the loss, and then, very controversially, he made you try to understand the men who caused it.
And a huge part of that was his relationship with Perry Smith.
It was the heart of the book. Capote became obsessed with Smith. He dug into his traumatic childhood, his artistic side. Smith was actually a talented artist. Capote was trying to understand how a person could be both sensitive and capable of such monstrous violence. He was trying to give context to evil.
But that quest for context raises some really serious ethical questions, right? Questions that still follow the true crime genre today.
They're huge questions. Did Capote hold back evidence to protect his story? Did he wait for the killers to be executed because he knew it was the only way to end his book? And maybe the biggest one, by humanizing Perry Smith so much, did he accidentally minimize the horror of what was done to the Clutters?
It's a tough balance.
It created this fundamental dilemma for the genre. How do you tell the truth about the victims while also exploring the psychology of the people who hurt them?
So Hickok and Smith were executed in 1965, and that was the legal end. But the cultural impact just keeps going.
Absolutely. In Cold Blood is a permanent part of our culture. It's this terrifying reminder that the American dream can be shattered not by some outside force, but by random violence emerging from greed and a broken mind right in the heart of the country.
So let's jump forward nearly 50 years into our world, the digital age, for our last case. The Long Island serial killer, LISK. The crime scene isn't a Kansas farmhouse. It's the desolate, windswept beaches of Ocean Parkway. This is the predator for our time.
Yeah, this case is a chilling look at modern life, at compartmentalization, and how a predator was able to operate for a decade, really, because society tended to overlook his victims.
It all starts in May 2010 with the disappearance of Shanann Gilbert.
Right. She was a sex worker who made a panicked 911 call from a client's house in the area and then just vanished, so the police start searching for her.
And that search, in December 2010, uncovers something much, much worse.
Far worse. A police officer and his cadaver dog are searching this thick brush along Ocean Parkway, and they find human remains. But it's not Shanann. It's the body of another woman, and then another, and another, and another.
The Gilgo Four.
Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amberlynn Costello, all wrapped in burlap, all dumped within a few hundred yards of each other. That was the moment they knew they had an active serial killer.
And the search expands, and they end up finding 10 sets of remains along that beach.
Which points to a very organized killer who knew that specific area intimately. It was his hunting ground and his dumping ground.
And the victim profile here is so important to understanding why this case went cold for so long. They were almost all young women, many of whom were sex workers advertising on Craigslist.
And that is a crucial and very sad part of the story. The sources make it clear these were young women whose disappearances just didn't set off massive, immediate police investigations.
Society looked the other way.
Society often looks the other way. The killer knew that. He preyed on that systemic neglect. He knew that the lack of initial public pressure gave him time to operate in a way the Lindbergh kidnapper never could have.
Which leads us to his methods, which were very modern, very calculated.
Oh, absolutely. His psychological control was incredible. He used his victims' own burner phones to make these short, taunting calls to their families after they were already dead.
That's just unbelievably cruel.
It's about maintaining power, but it also shows a technological savvy. Using untraceable burner phones gave him this shield of anonymity that was, for a long time, impossible for police to get through.
And geographically, he had to be a local, right?
He had to be. He moved like a ghost through that landscape. He knew the isolated spots, the tides, the blind spots in the suburban landscape where nobody would see him. For more than a decade, the case was completely cold. People even thought there might be multiple killers.
And then the break comes in 2023, the arrest of Rex Heuermann. And the shock was just immediate.
Because he was the definition of hiding in plain sight. A Manhattan architect, a husband, a father, lived in a nearby suburban town, Methapequa Park. He was the guy next door.
And his arrest was purely a product of modern forensics, this combination of old and new techniques.
It was a perfect storm of technology. It wasn't one thing, it was how multiple things came together.
So break that down for us. What were the key technologies that finally cracked this case?
Okay, so 3 main things. First, cell tower data. Investigators went back and painstakingly analyzed the location data from the burner phones used in those taunting calls. They were able to triangulate those calls to two key areas: the area right around Heuermann's home and his office in Manhattan.
So that put the killer's phone in his locations.
Exactly. Second, they used the same advanced genealogical DNA that identified Joseph Zarelli. They tested a male hair found on one of the victims, and it led them back to Heuermann through distant relatives on an ancestry database.
And the final piece, the one that everyone talks about, was the pizza box.
That's right. To get a direct DNA match to confirm the genealogy, police had to get his DNA without him knowing. They tailed him and collected a pizza box he threw away. The DNA from the crust was a direct match to the hair from the crime scene, and that was enough for the arrest warrant.
It's incredible. Cell phones, genetic family trees, and a discarded piece of pizza all working together.
It's exactly what it takes to catch a modern, high-functioning predator.
Which brings us to the psychology. I mean, how does a successful architect, a family man with the white picket fence, allegedly live this double life and commit these calculated horrors?
The psychology is all about meticulous compartmentalization. Heuermann seems to be an example of a serial offender who maintains this perfect public facade. The successful professional life, the family life, that's the cover. It allows him to operate right out in the open. It requires this profound psychological split where the violent life is completely walled off from the everyday suburban one.
And that's what's so terrifying.
It's what makes the public so afraid. The idea that the monster isn't some shadowy figure, but could be the successful, normal-seeming person living right next to you.
And even with his arrest, the case isn't fully closed.
It's not. He's charged with several of the murders, but it's still an active investigation whether he is responsible for all 10 of the Gilgo Beach victims. LISK is our modern cautionary tale. The violence is hidden behind a perfect veneer of normalcy.
You know, this whole deep dive has traced this really incredible arc through American crime, from the celebrity tragedy of the 30s to mid-century anonymity, all the way to the digital age.
The evolution in how we investigate is just so stark. Lindbergh was all about public chaos and this one revolutionary piece of physical evidence. But then you have the decades of silence for Joseph Zarelli, a case that could only be solved by the slow, patient work of genealogical DNA.
And the Clutter case, which wasn't about forensics as much as it was about narrative, about storytelling, and the ethical lines that get blurred when tragedy becomes art.
Right. And then you end with LISK, where you need burner phone tracking and cell tower data just to pierce the veil of a highly controlled suburban predator.
What's so amazing is how the technology changes, but the core behaviors.
They don't change at all. The calculated rage, the need for power, the psychological walls people build. What the sources show is that our ability to see into that darkness now depends almost entirely on technology, on connecting these digital and genetic dots across decades.
We started by talking about security, and after looking at these 4 cases, it really forces you to rethink what that even means.
The facts are undeniable. These horrific crimes didn't just happen on the margins. They happened to America's most famous family, the Lindberghs. They happened in the quietest, safest-seeming farmhouse in Kansas.
And they happened in the most ordinary white picket fence suburb imaginable, as we saw with LISK.
So the source material really leaves us with this one truly provocative question.
Which is,
if our best investigators need 50 years of genetic science to give a boy back his name, or if they need digital forensics to unmask the man next door, how do we even begin to stay vigilant in a world where the monsters have gotten so good at hiding in plain sight?
maybe it means we have to stop just checking the locks.
And start questioning the facade, because the surface of a life tells you almost nothing about what's going on underneath.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.